All right, Bruno, there we go. Okay, good. Good. So this is the busy slide, but basically the bottom line of OneQA is to make the biomed work more efficiently. So it's not just testing your device, but the documentation is the real bear a lot of the times, right? And we're always asking, you know, how many Fluke devices testing equipment do you have to run it with? And people would get answers all across the board. The biggest important thing about this thing is it's a complete device asset database, right? Anything can be fed into this. It's not, it's OEM agnostic. But on the regular devices, you would have to manually run a test with a button. But if you've got a Fluke enabled test procedure, it automates the whole thing and just goes right down and then right off to the CMMS. So my little blurb up here, just basically you're standardizing checklists, which I kind of compare it to a cookbook with recipes, right? So you've got a biomed following the PM that you're going to do, and it just goes right down. When Varun shows you the software, you'll see what I'm talking about. But basically, we're saying that it's standardizing that, it's increasing efficiency, and it's increasing your accuracy because you're going down to the field. It doesn't let you forget steps. It's just walking you right through it. You can customize your reports for regulatory compliance so that literally you can somebody coming in from JACO or another agency and you're standing right next to them and they say, hey, what's going on with this defib? And you say, okay, well, let's pull it up. Boom, right there, you've got an answer for them immediately on any device that you've got in your hospital. So the other good thing is when you're hiring new people, right? And what we call a knowledge vacuum can happen when you've got a tenured biomed or somebody who leaves to another place or retires. There's a lot of knowledge with that guy that's been there 30 years, something like that, right? And you're trying to train somebody new, and while you have this the onboarding of the software, they can add notes in. The manager can actually create the procedure and lock it down too, so people can't change it down the chain. It's a cloud setup, just like your CMMS would be. Everybody have a CMMS? So, you know, I've got little ISOs and things like that where they don't have a CMMS, so it can act as a standalone software piece if you have that. I've even had where a bigger IDN, they just wanted to start small and didn't want it to dovetail into the CMMS just yet because they were test bedding it. It's another way of going about it. But so you got CMMS in the cloud, OneQA in the cloud. It's going to be, this is a Windows-based platform, so it's going to be on a desktop, laptop usually. It could be on a Surface tablet, but it's not iOS or Android just yet. Okay. When you import assets from an existing CMMS, that's in a CSV file, just a Microsoft file, and gets those in. But when the OneQA jets that data out to the CMMS, that's in a JSON file. So just a little different. And all this is showing right here is the this is just your Fluke tech, right? And then it's just the asset hooked up, and they're just USBs hooking up each one as far as connectivity. Any questions just on that just yet? Okay. So these are all the devices and the modalities that work with it right now, that automates right now, right? So your electrical safeties, your defibs, and your vent testers. The only difference there on the 614 and the 615, they have the onboard SD card that can save data from the answer file and can be removed and port over. Those are all the standards conforming with. So this is our modality roadmap. Like I said, ESAs, vents, and defibs right now. Very safe. I don't know, anybody have to deal with the imaging side, dosimetry? Yeah. So that's about this summer is what we're looking at right now, right, Bruno? Yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, they do. They do. So basically, that would be like an imaging tech would be, we'd set them up with their own little OneQA station to be able to do that side. ProSim, patient monitoring, later this year. Next year is going to be busier with the ESUs for the QA ES3s, IDA 5s, and the incubators. This is just a typical setup right here. Busy for a defib, right? So it's just showing the laptop with USBs. It's going over to the defib. You got an impulse and a ESA hooked up to those. So just that would be if you had the full setup on both sides. It's just kind of clarifying. You know, I learned along the way. It's like, you know, I get talking because obviously I deal with the software all the time, and then just things that people make assumptions on that I say, you know, this is what software as a service is, right? So Windows-based, like I said, it's a monthly subscription. So you'll have a user or a seat or a license, right? So it's a price per user per month. Yes. It's on Windows 10, but I don't know what version, if that's what you're asking. Okay. Absolutely not. No. And this, I mean, this is developed within the last, what, 4 years, right? So it's all been Windows 10 anyway. Not really, right? I mean, yeah. So yeah. Yep. I personally have seen people log into both Chrome and IE, you know, or Edge, you know, and I haven't seen a problem there. So, good question. So the other thing too is it's concurrent licenses. So say, for example, say you got 20 techs, but when I don't want to overcharge what you have to have for licenses, right? So you just want the maximum number of users that are going to be on at the same time. It could be 15, it could be 12 if you're running separate shifts, or somebody's like the on-call person or whatever. So it's just, you know, you kind of tailor it to the account to say, how many people would you have on at the same time would be the number of users. Okay. Yes. No, sure. So in other words, when we sell a license, right, for OneQA, it's a monthly license, right? And you're going to be a user, right? Say you're one of 20 people, right? And we're saying, well, do you need 20 licenses? Because you might not need 20. You might only need 15 licenses, because if 20 people are never going to all be on at the same time, there's no point you paying extra for what you don't need, right? So, right. So it could be shift work. It could be just where the way you have it worked, where you wouldn't have all 20 ever being on at the same time. So it just that's in your own judgment. Okay. So of course, yeah. Well, I always had another license. You know, yeah, absolutely. Yep. So and then as far as it being a SaaS product, it's always updating, right? So you'll have the software updates, you'll have OEM service recommendations, and at this point, I'm hearing it's roughly once a quarter that would be done. So we're in Q&A here. I'm gonna get over to where Varun. If anybody has any questions at this point, this is just my little kind of marketing value prop. The software at this point. Any questions? It's a push, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a push. You'll get a notification as a user, and all you got to do is just reinstall, download and reinstall, and you have the latest and greatest. In fact, we did this yesterday. We just had a latest release of OneQA.
Yeah, we just had
yesterday. They're like, hey guys, just make sure you don't do it while we're presenting.
Yeah.
And it happened 24 hours before. So.
And push logons, they're going to change, at least what I've seen so far, once a quarter.
By the way, can you folks hear me okay? Okay, so my goal today is just to give you a quick glimpse into what OneQA looks and feels like, and how you might use it to ease the way you test your medical devices today. Okay, that's really my goal here. Feel free to jump in as I'm walking through the different steps. If you have any questions, we can walk through specifics if you'd like. But I want to start with the basics here. What does it actually look like? How do you get in? How do you set it up? How do you start using it? So it really is a desktop application. Okay, you can call it like you do Excel. You'll have OneQA as a shortcut on your desktop. Double click on it. It'll bring you to this page. This is where you sign in to the application. So I'm going to do that real quick.
That's a good question. We're working with about 9 people really at this point. We got probably our most polished application right now is True Asset, but our sister opco is Accruent, right? So that's TMS and Connective. You got AIMS, you got EQ2Ms, you got Rolo, FSI.
Yeah, we're connected to quite a few of them. We're connected in the sense we're communicating with quite a few of them. We have APIs set up that are very easily configurable and can connect to these CMMS systems. So it's not something that would take a lot of time. True Asset built an integration with us in a couple months.
So the format that you lay out, are you just sending data over and then having the CMS try to go to places, or are you taking the CMS, MMS, questions, and then putting back those sequence of questions where you put
Well, the customer has a choice with that vendor, number one, right? And since it's a bi-directional API, you can push, you can pull, right? Depending on how they want that. You can push something simple like a PDF, or you can push it out in a JSON file as raw data that literally goes into CMMS and let it convert it over, right? So as far as the conversations that we have with these vendors at this stage, those things just don't come turnkey, right? So yeah.
They already have their PDF, things, like we said, we put it later for 50, we set it for 100, we set it for 100, 200.
Right.
And then you move on to the advisor and go ahead and start on back and forth.
Right.
Does it load up to their format?
Yeah, so your typical clean, what we hear for a universal wish is like saying it goes to that automated test on the DFID, done, and then right off to the CMMS, like seamlessly. It could be a 1 stage, it could be a 2 stage, depending on verification, whatever you need.
Yeah, so the level of integration is essentially twofold. You have the basics where we can pull in the asset and the procedure information into OneQA, run the test, generate a report, push that report back to the CMMS system. Then there are a few customers we're working with who require deeper level of integration. So we kind of work one-on-one depending on.
I'm asking just what through quote.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. Yeah.
I've had some focus in the conversation.
Okay. Good.
I figured it out one time, if I can cut 5 minutes off of every one of my PMs.
Yeah.
I required an extra check. But the tech didn't have to do it. I think 5 minutes times, 120 places, there's an hour.
Well, there's an ROI calculator that when we're on a call, we go through, right? And it's based on assets, total number of assets, because really the electrical safety is going to be the largest component of that. So now if you ask somebody and they're proud of what they do and they're good at it and they're like saying, how long does it take you to do it? Yeah, a minute, right? I said, okay. So, and they would do that to prove a point. But if you're doing 700 of them in a couple of days or whatever time it takes for you to do it, it's going to get longer, and your documentation time is what's going to snowball, right? Yeah.
I can see the value.
Yep.
In being able. I'd rather have my text. I can see 100 hours over here. That 5 minutes on the safety check. I give 100 hours over there to comparison.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we find that when we look at the total number of assets, if you're a little place that's got 700 assets, it's not as much of an ROI as somebody who's got 3,000 or 5,000 assets, right, or more. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
So we typically have a set of customers that we work with today who are using OneQA to test their devices. And we go observe virtually and even in person, observe their test times. And we've had a few of them run. So they used to do it manually, pretty much like take the procedures from the manual, set it up on the instrument, run the test, handwrite or type in Excel the results, and then port them over to the CMMS. We have them go through that cycle, and we have them do the same thing using OneQA. And we have data points we've collected that measure the delta there in minutes, and we kind of use their typical technician per hour salary, and we calculate estimate. Yeah, so we're actually getting real data. These are not, estimates that we.
I mean, it started out with
We started off with the hypothesis, of course, but as we started building our customer base here, we've learned from them, and we picked up their actual data and the actual time savings. Now, time savings is one component of it. There's also the stuff that's harder to measure, like, hey, what's the likelihood of not having your team rework this procedure? How often do you have to go in and say, oh my God, you tested that wrong, and now we have the wrong report and our compliance hasn't, So that's hard to measure, but the bare minimum of time savings by itself is showing us strong ROI.
Yeah, right. Factoring is a big thing, right? So that's my whole thing on the accuracy. Yeah. Or I had one guy, he had an example. He said, look, I'm trying to get into an OR and I got to go in there off hours, middle of the night to try and get in when they're not doing surgeries. And it could be, if it's a big hospital, it's, far away. You get up, you take the time to do it, and you're looking at your data the next day, you're like, man, I missed a step or something's wrong. Then you got to do the whole thing all over again. This thing, at least it kind of leads you through everything. For someone who's not as experienced and trying to get everything done, it's a recipe to follow. So
we mostly agree at that.
yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Especially if we can get to like an instant situation, because they're using your documentation to report.
I can tell you, defibs too. Like I work cardiac cath lab and worked for Medtronic for years. The way we deliver to the patient is not the same joules that you're testing at. So I was always curious about that because we only use 100, 200, and 360. So it's just the way things were set up from the manufacturer. Yep.
It's really, there's a lot of different in there.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about CMS.
Yes, and there's many more than that. That's an easy one. 45% of the market is connected and Volo. I mean, TMS and connected, right? So Accruent owns 4 Rivers TMS from 2011, and then they came up with their own connected as well. So that's both of them together with that company, and that's our sister company, and Volo. So that's the big ones.
Yeah. The rest of it is pretty fragmented. There are so many players.
Yeah.
Those are the dominant ones.
Yeah.
Any others? Any other questions before we proceed? Okay, awesome. So here's what you would see first when you log into OneQA. This is a repository of the assets that you have at your site. You might have logged that you might consider the most relevant to run tests or automate tests for, and you're going to see a summary of those assets up front. Okay. Before we go into the assets, I just want to show you kind of what the first homepage looks like. At the top left, you'll see home, run, and data. Home really houses your assets and procedures. This is kind of your setup, if you will. Run will essentially be kind of the processor that once you execute a test, it starts to process the data in the back end and capture your results. If you are running a procedure within OneQA and you're interrupted for some reason, you need to go handle repairs like the gentleman at the back said, and you need to stop, you can do that and pick up where you left off. And those procedures are typically stored within the run block. Data houses all your results. So any historical results you want to go look at within the software, you just click on that data button and you'll get access to it. that's kind of your holy grail of OneQA at the top, right, where you can access everything that you need to do and that has been done within the platform for your facility. On the right is where you can manage the devices. So for instance, this block here, you go down there, you'll be able to figure out or look up very quickly whether you've connected a Impulse 7000 if you're using that device, whether you connected an ESA 615, whatever it is, a VT, all of those devices will be listed there. Like Terry said, they're a simple USB connection and OneQA will recognize them. Where you see my name up at the top right is a drop-down menu, and you can manage your licenses, your settings, your tenant settings all through this portal. Also get help. If you're looking to learn about how to use OneQA, you go to help. There's also a chat bot there. We'll provide you an in-app product demo. We'll give you documentation so your techs or you can learn as you go within the software and get live answers as you work through it. That's a general overview of the software. I'll come back to the message that you see in there in a few minutes. Okay, so let's come back to assets. As I mentioned, this is the repository of all your assets, and there are a few pieces of information that you will see here. Things like the model, the manufacturer, the medical device category. Then what I want to call out is the column all the way to the right, which says status. Now, I'll show you in a second, but with each asset, you're able to set up your last preventative maintenance date and your upcoming preventative maintenance date. And if you set up those dates, OneQA will keep track of that timeline and will flag them green, yellow, or red. Green meaning you're good, you've run PM, you're set. Yellow means that PM is upcoming. You should watch out for it. Make sure that you've resourced it and you know you need to test the device. And red means it's past due. There's a backlog, you may want to address it quickly. So quick summary of what status each asset is in and what you might consider doing when it comes to running those tests. Yes, sir. That is a good question. It's basically the yellow. I have to get back to you on that, but I think we've set it up so that it's like a month before. But let me get back to you on that.
Yeah, they said that on a call. It was something like 4 to 6 weeks, and it's not assignable, is it? I mean, it's what it does by default.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Is it editable?
That's what you were just asking.
Yeah.
I don't think at this stage it is, but I think it's something that might be needed.
Yeah. What is a reasonable window?
Something is like on a quarterly basis. You've got to do that within a 30 days. If it's semi-annual, I think you have a 45 days. And then if it's annual, I think you have like a 60 day. Which you're about 30 days before, 30 days after. That's the thing.
Okay.
So it depends on the device. Permission. What that.
How when you folks do it, how far in advance are you tracking the statuses of your PMs? You usually look at them 30 days in advance. How's that? Okay.
You look at them files, make sure that do I have to call a vendor in? You do it so that I can schedule that. If you call on the first day of the month, well, I'm looking at the month sometimes. And then the other thing is, if you've got a ventilators and stuff, especially COVID and stuff, you need to have PM kits. When you're doing PMs, you need to be able to have those on hand, or otherwise, it's take a lot of ventilators. Trying to get PM kits, whatever it's on, you just don't get them.
And you can look at a tickler file basically in the morning when you resort it and you put all the reds up top, the yellows are next, and the greens are at the bottom. So.
All right. Okay. Let's keep going here. So that's kind of the story of what you'll see on the summary page. Now, if you want to bring more assets in, there are two ways you can do it. You can either import the assets from an external file, which I'll show you, or you can create an asset from scratch. If you want to create an asset from scratch, all you got to do is hit this plus button at the right, and you'll see a very simple template. You can add pretty much the same items that you saw on the previous page with the manufacturer model. Here's where you set up your last and upcoming preventative maintenance dates. And we've seen a lot of folks, a lot of users use the description block to highlight the location of the asset at their facility, right? So you might get that information in your work order management system, but as you're working within OneQA, you may want to reference, hey, where is this asset located right now? And moreover, you can also add an image. So again, if you're looking for, you might have a good grasp of what the device looks like, what the setup looks like typically, but maybe someone on your team who's new doesn't. This is a good reference point for them to catch on pretty quickly. Yeah, location as well, right? So that's option one. Option two is, I'm gonna close out of here. Option two is you can go to those three dots at the top right and click on import assets. Okay, so you might have your asset list housed in Excel somewhere, like, hey, I'm not gonna type every single one of these in here. So how do I do it in bulk? And so I click on import assets. We have a template file just so that it's configured in a way that OneQA recognizes it best. And so you can use that template file to configure your current data set. It's a smaller, it's just a few 5 or 6 columns. And then if you hit browse here, you have a file, which I do. I'm gonna pull in, and you can pull in that CSV file, continue, and it just tells you that we're going to import 3 new assets. We'll summarize it so you confirm that you pulled the right data set, and you hit import. And so as it does that, once it does that, it'll hit done, and now as you can see, that list grew. So you now have 3. Imagine if you had to import 30 or 50 or hundreds of assets. It's a pretty straightforward way of doing that. And then you can go into each one and edit and make changes as you'd like. Okay, so that's typically how you would work with the asset tab at this point. I want to move to procedures next, but I'm curious how many of you folks use, defibrillator. How many of you use defibrillators, test defibrillators, do PMs on those? Pretty much everyone, I'm guessing, right? What kinds of defibs? LifePack, Zoll, MRCs. Yeah, does that ring a bell? Okay. The reason I asked is what I want to take you through is our procedure library. OneQA, one of the benefits, many benefits of having OneQA is we as a team have set up over 50 templates, right? They're templates that come from the manufacturers. They're compliant with the standards, NFPA, IDC, and even the actual OEM units, the manuals that come from the OEMs. And we've built those out for you. So if you are using, for instance, I think we talked about LifePack, so we'll go into LifePack in a second, but let me, yeah. So if you have the LifePack 15 or the 20, we have a procedure built in there for you. And all you need to do is follow the, I'm gonna go in there in a second. All you need to do is follow the instructions in there, hook up your devices and hit run, and the procedure will run for you. So just to kind of give you a sense of how the procedure is structured, what you're gonna see manifest here on this is a digitized version of what you might see on paper in the manual. And we have the procedure name, the descriptions. You'll typically start with the test setup block, where you would either manually enter the work ID, or if you're integrated with the CMMS system, we'll bring it in for you. And so all of this will be configured. You'll know your asset ID. We also have the ability to pull in our test device information. If you're connected to a Fluke device, you'll see your cal date in there as well. So if there is a flag there, you know that the equipment needs to go in for cal. You'll have that hint down there.
I got a question.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So how will that flag, other than in that field, how will that flag on the report?
So yeah, so the beauty of this is that the way it's set up today, you'll see the date, but because of the flexibility of OneQA, for instance, you see that pencil up there, you can actually click on that and edit the procedure to call out a flag and say, hey, look, I'm having I'm not sure my calibration date is upcoming. I want to make sure I add a warning just below that block that says, that instructs the technician, says, look, if the calibration date is X or nearing X, just make sure you bring it up to me, or let's raise the flag and make sure that the equipment goes in. So while it, and that will show up on your report. Those types of flags will show up on your results and reports. Because the way OneQA is set up to generate reports, there are a few templates, which I'll go into in a second. There's the summary, which will basically tell you, hey, here's the outcome, here's the result, pass or fail, and will generally give you the results. But then there are the detailed report templates, which actually pull in the contextual data that you've added. So if you add instructions in there, you say, hey, these are the changes you need to make to the setup when you get halfway through the procedure. All of those will get printed out onto your detailed report. So when anyone's assessing it, they at least have an understanding of the environment or any changes to the test setup environment that you might have made.
Is it, I want to send my impulse 7,000 to somebody over.
If you want to send
Calibration.
The report, right? I mean, it's just an encapsulated report, or are you saying the raw?
In the impulse 7,000.
Yep, correct.
Those I want to send it. I want to have third party. Can I send that field in somewhere?
I think that is something that you may have to do off OneQA. We don't have that capability because it pulls in that data from the instrument. So that particular date is not editable, but not today, not within OneQA. Tell us more about what.
I haven't heard that question before,
Yeah.
but I understand what you're saying, right?
It's just number of third party.
Of course, yeah. Yep.
So if it's used, if they're using your plan, how much flexibility do you have?
Right. No, that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this, oops, just control panel there. Make sure we go down. So I just want to show you that, as you can see with the scroll bar, we pretty much have everything in that procedure in there. And just to give you a sense of the level of detail in here, we're about 3/4 of the way through, and we're getting here. This is where we've set up the safety tests, which you're probably running day in and day out. You can set up your parts. You have your connections mapped out on this view. There's the mains voltage test. Your resistance tests are set up here as well. You can add test points if you'd like. And then you have leakage current. But as you can see, within each of these blocks, you have the ability to customize. It's like a Word document. You can open up a block, add an image, add instructions, and then also set up part limits from your test when you run it. So at every block, your technician or whoever is running the test knows exactly what they need to do step by step. And if they do it 100 times over 20 years, they'll be able to do the same thing every time with consistency. Okay, so that's kind of how we've laid out our procedures. What I want to highlight is also another thing, and you're seeing the downloaded procedure library, but every time you get into OneQA the first time, you go to those 3 dots at the top right. You see the grayed out download sample procedures. Once you get in, you hit that download sample procedures, those procedure templates will get downloaded and they'll be in your procedure library. You can use them as you like.
One thing I just wanted to add too, we had a couple questions come up with a couple customers where they said you can either do the real-time pass-fail, right? And it does report like simple like that, or it can be quantitative with numbers. So you do have a choice on that way too, depending on how deep you want to be in the weeds on the recording. So. No. That was just, we were highlighting the defibs as far as procedures. So we've got about 50 or 60 canned procedures right now, kind of just a cross-sectional mix, right? So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that, to be determined, but what it is so our applications guy, Elliot Weldon, he was a biomed before. And so he's been writing these procedures, right? And based from the OEM service excerpts going in. But so if he's working with a customer on post-sale integration and helping them out, say, we try and identify, hey, so what's your biggest users, that's taking up your time, and we can help you with those templates, right? So at this stage, no, so hop right on it.
Yeah. So again, it's a similar workflow as the assets. All you got to do is hit the plus sign there. Sorry, what was it?
In what format? Is it just an Excel spreadsheet kind of thing? Yes, I mean, because you can import a CSV file from, which is just a simple, sum value file, right? So, and that'll import assets in like that. And as far as procedures, if you build, it just depends what you built them in is the question. So.
What do you typically build your procedures?
Okay. So what Elliot does there is when he helps people out, he shows you how to build a procedure, and you just cut and paste, boom, and it drops right in, and everything's, they say, well, I don't want all that much information, and you can streamline it to what you want for your test, or you can have the full Monty. So, does that answer your question? For that type of situation, yes, but it's also going to be running those procedures by manual buttons, and then it's going to integrate all that reporting into the CMMS. So
we do recommend that you start using OneQA and you're building your procedures, just build them in here, because it'll work like a Word document in a way. I'll show you that in a second. And you have to do it once, and you're not emailing the document across. Anyone who has access to this will be able to see it. So if you did want to kind of follow through on your question, if you did want to create a procedure, all you have to do was press that plus. You can just say procedure 1, 2, 3, give it a name. You can select a category. Let's call it defib. Let's call it a PM. You can say, hey, it's an OR 5. And then here's where, a lot of these blocks are set up or are locked in when you set up the asset. Right? So that information is already in there. You have to link an asset to a procedure so that it knows that, hey, here's the test, the series of tests you want to run, and here's the asset that you're using or you're testing for it. So I think the one thing that I call your attention to is this toolbar at the bottom. This is the toolbar that gives you flexibility to set up generic questions and tests, and also specific tests for your safety testing, for your defibs, and for your gas flow analyzers. And so if you were to look at this, you can add a new section. That could be arbitrary. So this is where you could add your question on, hey, you can ask the question there, is the calibration date nearing December 31st? And then add instructions. If yes, this is what we want you to do. Call this number or talk to Dave or John or whoever if that's happening. And so you can add that instruction there in a free form new sections. This is like adding a paragraph to your Word document. Another thing you could do is instructions, right? So there's a block for instructions here. You can use this block if you'd like for the same reasons. Hey, the PM approaching a certain date, make sure you flag it, or hey, make sure that these tests, the cables, the wires are connected correctly to X, Y, and Z on your defib. You can also add questions. So in here, this could be sort of binary, the pass, fail, and not applicable. But you could ask the question, hey, is the leakage test result that you're seeing? By the way, you get real-time validation. Is the limit set correctly? Is the limit set to 500 or half a microamp or 500 microamps or whatever it is? And if they click green, that means that that'll get printed in your report and be like, okay, this check was done while the test was being run. And then that's when they proceeded to the next. You could have instructions that say, hey, if I click on fail, stop, go call your supervisor, and let's come and troubleshoot what's going on. So you're not waiting. Basically, what this lets you do is not wait till the entire procedure is run, till you have all the results and you spent the extra 10 minutes gathering the outcome before you actually stop and troubleshoot along the way. Because that error or the setup error, whatever it is, might cascade through, and now you have a bunch of results that didn't really move the needle or you can't report out on. So that's an example there. Now this block here, the lightning icon, is where you can see a bunch of your safety tests. Probably familiar with this. And if you want to add ground wire resistance, you can add that block in there. Again, set up your upper and lower limits, configure the test. Here, you can also add leakage current if you'd like. Probably the most common for you folks as you're running these tests. Again, your lower and upper limits set up based on polarity of your connections as well. And all of these are, blocks. This is kind of like your Word document. You just kind of added categories serially, one below the other, and they're completely editable for your purposes. What you can also do again is, your defib testers, you want to add output energy block, you can do that. You want to add a sig time test, you can do that. So now you've got your safety and your basic defib tests as well in your procedure. And then finally, if you do have the BT900 on site or using any other gas flow analyzers, you can set up these test blocks as well and edit them as you'd like. So once you're done with creating this type of procedure, you can just hit save and that'll save it for you. You can go back to it, edit it, link it to an asset, and run a test, get results. So that's kind of how you create a procedure from scratch within OneQA, and it's going to be there for life, and you can share it. You can actually restrict editing of it if you're an admin. Make sure that you can make it read only. You can do that as well in OneQA. You can also open it up if you want others to be able to edit it versus just view it. So there's a permissions layer as well within OneQA.
What if I have procedures that are similar? I've got one for lockback 20 already, 15 just has 2 or 3 more steps. I'm going to have to go back and read all of that from scratch. How do I take a piece and do that? All I've got to do.
Are you talking about combining?
Doing complication. I've already got a procedure very close to it.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can edit any one of those steps. You can delete them out. You can create whether they've got the exact same steps or you wanted to add a couple from what you had previously. That's all.
Yes, that can be my whole new procedure. I still got my old one, but yes, I've got a new one.
Right. Right. And especially, so if somebody, say the manager who's got the admin rights to it, and he spent all that time making sure that's right and updated like that, then it can be locked down to where down the chain, people can't change that unbeknownst to him as well.
Yeah, we can, we obviously want to make sure that you have what you need, even if you decide to cancel or do your automation differently. So we'll make sure that you have the.
And remember, all the
access on
under the assumption that you have the CMMS, it's pushed that data to your CMMS, so it's holding that data, independent of OneQA. So.
Yeah, we'll make sure you have you need it. Okay, so let's go back, and I know we have about 10 more minutes. I want to leave time for questions as well. So let me show you a couple quick things here. So you folks mentioned the LifePack 20, so something that you used. What I want to show you is if you actually get into a procedure that's linked to an asset, what does that look like? And what does running a procedure feel like? And so here's where you look at these categories within an asset. We've linked two procedures here. One's a basic safety check, which kind of to your point is a subset of what is already in this LifePack procedure. We didn't really want to do everything, so we said, yeah, let's cut this block and make its own procedure, electrical safety, a simple electrical safety check. So what this is telling us is that these two procedures are linked to this asset, and I can run either of these right now from here within OneQA, and we'll execute. Okay. What you'll also, and we'll do that in a second, but what you'll also see here is an activity tab. This is a very quick, if someone wants to go in and QA what was done on the asset previously, but doesn't want all the details, they can just go in here, look at all the runs for a particular procedure on this asset, and quickly eyeball whether the test passed or failed, and when it was run. But if you want more details, you can go to the results tab. You'll see in this case, I've run it a few times, got a good result, 3 out of 4, the 4th time was incomplete. I stopped testing it. I'll come back to that in a second. But again, if I want the details of the results there, I just click one more time and it takes me in, and it'll show me kind of what you've seen a few times already, where you've got the work order ID, the setup information about the asset. A quick example here of a binary question that I showed you in the other example of creating a procedure was make sure that the power cord is matched. Very simple yes or no, so that these things may not be as intuitive when you're trying to run PM, but could be important. And so that's where you can hit a pass and fail, because if you fail at that stage, you've got other issues to go fix over running an automation. And then you set up your safety testing here. This is just a quick summary of what we came about with our results. And then finally, the question at the end is you're likely going to have to set up a sticker and put it on the device to make sure that has been recorded. If you do, you want to make sure your technician's compliant with that, you can ask the question there. So just it's called OneQA, right? So it's a good way of making sure that all your PMs are run to the level of fidelity that you need, to give that confidence to the compliance bodies that, hey, look, we're doing this right. We're not just coming up with numbers. These are real results. Okay, so that's what a result template would look like. A result view would look like. If you go to templates, this is where, coming back to your question on how many details can I include, what goes out into a report, we have a few templates pre-created here for you. You can see a few examples. You have the concise report. It's pretty much, hey, here's the asset, here's the pass and fail results, and it's a one-pager pretty much. The detailed report will pull in all the contextual information. What were the instructions in that test procedure? What were the changes that you might have incorporated in your setup? What were some of the pass-fail questions and the responses to those? And so there are different types of configurations. You can make copies, you can edit them, however you want to configure. You want to put your company logo on the report, we have a way to do that as well. I'll show you in a second. So let's go back to this procedure here, right? So if I were to take the results from this procedure and say, okay, I want to export the data. I can export it in 3 different ways, but let's look at the report template for a moment. If I hit export this, I say let's put it in the, I've pre-created an MD Expo template. So let's put it into the MD Expo template and hit export. And this could be like your facility template as well. If you have You want to put the logo in your hospital and do that. So we'll save this. Yes, I'm under place. And let's go back to folders. And let's see where it was. I think it's this one here. Gotta make sure it's the list. Yeah, it's this. I think it's this one. Oh, there you go. So that's kind of where the MD Expo logo ended up. Again, you can replace it with your hospital logo. All you got to do is go into the report templates, edit the report templates, and you can copy and paste. So if I want to replace, this is an older logo. If I want to replace it with the latest one, you know, I have the image set up here in Paint. I can just screenshot this and paste it into the report template, and that'll do it for me. So pretty straightforward in terms of setting up your reports. And I think the only other thing that I think might be interesting here is if we go into go back into that asset real quick, and let's try running this procedure here, the simple electrical safety check. Just want to show you what that looks and feels like. And so I'm just gonna add a work order. Keep going. The asset information's in there. We have that. We're not connected right now, but you know, I'm gonna go in and start saying, you know, responding to this. Say, yeah, okay, the power cord looks good. Safety test, yeah, I get this. All Doppler power on, all of this is fine. Before secure the test, ensure patient monitors plugged in the equipment outlet. And this is kind of where you have your device. This is where you would plug in your medical device, right? That's what this block is trying to tell you. Make sure that you're not connected to just the Fluke hardware, but you're actually connected to the device. Simple, but could be overlooked, and you might, over time, you might, you know, waste 15 or 20 minutes. There. So you can keep going. You see ground wire resistance. All of this is kind of what we've set up here. If all of that looks good, and you can hit confirm, and you hit done, that's just going to tell OneQA that you're satisfied with the procedure, the way it was run, executed, and it's going to now take you to the results page, like I showed before. And so now I have on April 17th, just right now, that's my most recent execution of the test. This is logged in. We come back later on in the day and look at it, it'll still be there. Okay. So that's kind of how you look at your, you'd run a test and you'd log your results. You can export this. There's one final thing I want to show you here is going back to my comment earlier on in this demo. I said that if you're working in a procedure and you're interrupted, something else is going on, there's a fire, you got to fight somewhere else. What happens? Like, how do you're bang in the middle of a procedure? There's nothing to be worried about, because if we go back and we try to simulate that situation here, say, hey, I'm in the middle of this procedure. I want to test the entire procedure, the life back, not just the safety tests. Let's go in. Let's go to the procedure. Say, okay, I'm here. I want to run the procedure. It's going to start running this procedure, and you know, you're kind of somewhere midway through it. You're cycling through it, and it's like, oh, I got to go do something else right now. I need to drop this. How much am I going to lose? I'm 75% through it. All you got to do is hit save and close. It'll save the instance as is for you. So when you're ready to come back and resume testing, you can just pick up where you left off. You don't have to restart. OneQA knows where you stopped. So I'm going to hit save and close. And here's where in the run tab, you see an in progress title. You'll see all the procedures that are in progress that you might have had to leave and go do other things instead of. So that, Yeah, that in a nutshell is what OneQA looks and feels like. We are happy to take questions. I know Terry's got another quick slide to show you, so I'm happy to cycle to it.
Yes. So it's a free 30-day trial. And say you were in the middle of that trial and say, hey, I've been building some procedures and now I want to buy it, right? It just, all it takes is a license key and everything that you built converts right over. It's the same software.
How do I download the trial software?
Well, if you've seen any email from me, that's at the bottom, number one. Number two, if you go in on flukebiomedical.com, right, and you go under software, the OneQA right there, right at the bottom, it says trial, right? There's several places that actually says that.
Yeah, it's 30 days and you can get the full capabilities.
Yep.
Full set of capabilities in there, so you can try pretty much everything that I just walked through today.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much everything. Yeah. So, any other questions?